Great. Well, hello, everyone. Today we are going to talk about how to help your child develop a healthy relationship with food, with exercise, and with their body. And this presentation will have information for everyone, K through 12 parents, like Carissa said. So know that this information is not just for one age group. It's also not just for parents of one gender. We're not just talking about parents of girls here, and I will speak more on that in just a bit. The reason that I am here today to talk to you about how to help your child develop a healthy relationship with food, with exercise, and with their body is because an unhealthy relationship with any of those things is a precursor to an eating disorder. And there are things that you can do at home to help reduce your child's risk of developing an eating disorder. Again, more on that in just a bit. But I'm excited to be here with you all. My name is Amie Guice, and I live right here in Homewood. I have a second grader and a kindergartner at Edgewood. So I am a mom of two boys. I'm also a registered dietitian and a certified eating disorders specialist, or CEDS, through the International Association of Eating Disorders Professionals, which is totally a mouthful. But as you might can imagine, the combination of being an eating disorder dietitian and being a mom has me particularly passionate about what I'm going to be talking to you about today. Before we get started, I'm going to drop a link in the chat for a copy of these slides so that you can take notes as we go along if you would like to do so, if that's a way that you learn. So let me get that pulled up really quick. All right. And that link is coming your way. You can let me know if you do not receive that in the chat. If you are tuning into this presentation, I am assuming that you already feel, or at least assume, that eating disorder prevention is important. But I want to take a second to tell you a little bit more about eating disorders to help give you a deeper understanding of why eating disorder prevention is important. Eating disorders are mental illnesses that are extremely harmful to both our mental health and our physical health. And unfortunately, they can be fatal. In the US, there is on average one death every 52 minutes as a direct result of an eating disorder. And they have the second highest mortality rate of any mental illness. They were first for a long time, but in recent years were surpassed by opioid use disorder in the midst of the opioid epidemic. Hospital admissions for adolescents with eating disorders has more than doubled since the pandemic. So eating disorders are on the rise. This is very much a relevant issue, and an issue that I'm glad to be speaking on today. There are 8 different feeding and eating disorder diagnoses: anorexia, bulimia, binge eating disorder, OSFED or other specified feeding or eating disorder, ARFID or avoidant restrictive food intake disorder, pica, rumination disorder, and UFED or unspecified feeding or eating disorder. I'm not going to be digging into the specifics of each of these diagnoses today, but I want you to have the awareness of what diagnoses exist, which is why this slide is here. And it's important for you to know that an eating disorder is not an illness that only affects young, thin, affluent white girls, as is commonly believed and portrayed in the media and elsewhere. Eating disorders affect people across all body sizes, all ages, all races and ethnicities, all genders, all socioeconomic statuses, meaning that anyone can have or can develop an eating disorder. That includes our boys along with our girls. That includes our elementary school age kids along with our teenagers. That includes our kids from lower income households as well as our kids from higher income households. That includes our kids in larger bodies along with our kids in smaller bodies. You get the point. No one is immune here. Now let's look at what causes an eating disorder. This is important and leads us right into the discussion that we're going to have today about eating disorder prevention. I mentioned that an eating disorder is a mental illness, right? An eating disorder is a mental illness that is caused by and is influenced by biological factors, psychological factors, and environmental factors. In other words, there's never ever one singular cause of an eating disorder. Instead, it's this kind of perfect storm kind of combination of things. So, just to give you some examples, biological factors can be or biological factors that can influence the development of an eating disorder can be genetic predisposition, one's neurochemistry, history of dieting, puberty. Psychological factors can be anxiety, depression, trauma, substance use, life transitions or stressors like changing schools or graduating, among other things. And then environmental factors that influence the development of an eating disorder are things like cultural pressure to be thin, social media messaging, teasing or bullying related to weight or size, and family dynamics and how people in the household talk about and interact with food, with exercise, and with bodies. So everything we talk about today will fall under this environmental factors category. So what does that mean? What that means is that there are still biological and psychological factors at play that will affect your child's risk of developing an eating disorder in their lifetime. But you can significantly reduce that risk by addressing environmental factors like the way you talk about food and exercise and bodies in your home. So I'm going to teach you how to do just that. And I can't do that without first saying that none of what we talk about today is meant to shame you. We all do the best we can with the information we have. And many of you, if I had to guess, will have never received this type of information before. I imagine that many things that you hear today will be new to you and will perhaps be different than information you've received about food and exercise and bodies in the past. And a lot of that is just because of the culture that we live in. Many people are simply not aware of the messages that their kids are receiving from them about food, exercise, or their bodies. And I feel like I can safely assume that you all are navigating feeding your family, talking about food and health, that sort of thing with really good intentions. So shame really has no place here. We are here to learn and to be aware, not to be perfect. Parents and caregivers can have a really positive impact on the way a child feels about themselves. So you're in a really good position here. So let's dive in. First, let's talk about how to strengthen your child's relationship with food and eating to reduce their risk of developing an eating disorder. First and foremost, I want you to neutralize the language you use around food to set your child up to have a positive relationship with food instead of one that's built on things like guilt, fear, and shame. So let's dive into this more so that you can get a better understanding of what I mean. When I say neutralize the language you use around food, I encourage you to resist the urge to use words like good and bad, healthy and unhealthy, clean, junk, etc., to describe food, even when you're trying to teach your child about food or nutrition, which we'll talk about in just a second. Also resist the urge to teach your child that the nutritional value of one food is better or worse than the nutritional value of another food. That might sound confusing. And again, we're going to talk about what to say about nutrition in a moment. But something I encourage you to consider is that, sure, the calories, the macronutrients, the vitamins and minerals vary food to food. But the reality is that all foods provide nutrition, and nutrition is only one of the reasons that we eat food. Food is connection with loved ones. food is pleasure, food is tradition, food is culture. I could go on and on. Lastly, resist the urge to talk about how a food does or doesn't impact weight or appearance. First of all, this is not a child's burden to hold. And second of all, there are a lot of factors that impact weight, not just calories in versus calories out, as is commonly believed. So, why not teach your child what foods are healthy or are good for them and what foods are unhealthy or bad for them? What is the problem with that? First and foremost, understand that kids aren't going to begin to understand abstract concepts like nutrition and health until at least the age of 12. So that's something important to consider. But number one, using healthy and unhealthy to describe food and to teach about food, what that does is it creates food hierarchies and can cause food related guilt, fear, and shame that significantly impacts some people's relationship with food. And for some, can contribute to the development of an eating disorder. We want our kids to know that food can be fun and can be enjoyed and doesn't have to be feared. Number two, teaching your child that some foods are healthy or are good for them and some foods are unhealthy or are bad for them also moralizes food and can actually impact the way your child feels about him or herself as a person. Kids are really black and white, all or nothing, rules-based thinkers, especially through the elementary and preteen years, but it can certainly continue past that. Plus, they really internalize what their parents say to them, and they will identify with things we say to them. So if we tell them, we don't eat XYZ type of food because it's bad for us, many kids will interpret that as, if I eat XYZ food, I am bad, or I am unhealthy, or if I don't eat XYZ food, I'm a good person. And for particularly sensitive kids, this may even lead to them stop eating enough food in general, which clearly we don't want to be the case. Number three, teaching about healthy and unhealthy when it comes to food can also create a lot of confusion and potentially lack of trust with parents or caregivers who then inevitably allow a quote unquote unhealthy food. That might be pizza and birthday cake at a birthday party, or ice cream at the beach with grandma. My point is, it'll happen at some point. So confusion and lack of trust can enter in our kids' minds in these types of scenarios. And finally, teaching about food and nutrition in this way can lead to restricting or binge eating behavior, which for some kids might just be a phase, and for other kids might evolve or progress into a really destructive eating disorder. So if we're not going to categorize food as healthy and unhealthy and teach our kids what foods are healthy and what foods are unhealthy, what should we do instead? Instead, talk positively about food or just maintain neutrality in the way that you talk about food. You can just call it what it is: a grape or a cinnamon roll or a piece of pizza or breakfast or a snack or a candy bar, and teach your child about flavor: salty, sweet, sour, bitter. These cookies are sweet. About texture: crunchy, soft, chewy, creamy, that sort of thing. These carrots change from crunchy to soft when we cook them. Teach them about the appearance of food, so different sensory properties of food. Teach your child where different foods come from, where or how to buy and how to prepare different foods, the food group that different foods belong to. Is it a meat, legume, fruit, vegetable, grain, dairy, that sort of thing? What nutrients are in different foods and what those nutrients can do to help the body, if you really know that information. And no pressure at all to know that information. It's okay if you don't. But for example, there is fat in this avocado, and fat helps your brain grow and develop. Or there are carbohydrates in this bread, and carbohydrates give us energy. Or there is protein in this chicken, and protein helps our muscles grow. Teach your child that different foods provide different nutrients, and that what's most important is that we eat all sorts of different foods, that we eat enough to nourish our bodies fully, and that we enjoy what we eat. Pleasure and satisfaction is a normal part of eating. And lastly, teach your child to listen to his or her body and trust its feedback about hunger and fullness and satisfaction. With younger kids, this may be as simple as, when they're asking to be excused from the table or saying they're done with dinner, asking, is your belly full? And if they say yes, allowing them to be done. Another example may be to not question whether or not your teenager is really still hungry after they finish their first round of mac and cheese and say they're still hungry. Don't feel like you need to be their food police. Encourage them to attune to their own instincts around hunger and fullness and satisfaction, because this helps foster trust between your child and their body. And their relationship with their body is quite literally the longest relationship they're ever going to have. I'm going to say that again. Your child's relationship with their body is the longest relationship they're ever going to have. So we want it to be a healthy relationship that's built on trust, right? Okay. Second way to strengthen your child's relationship with food and eating: expose your child to a variety of foods, if you have that privilege, without pressure or expectation for them to eat everything they're exposed to. Consistent exposure to new foods without pressure to try them is what helps kids become familiar with different foods and begin to feel safe enough to explore them. Exposure can mean having them help you cook it, or simply putting it on their plate, or just having it as one option when they're fixing their own plate, or putting it on your plate and them seeing you eat it. Exposure can be a lot of different things. So expose your child to as much variety as you're able to. Number 3, eat with your child when you can, and eat the same meal they eat, ideally, to model eating a variety of different foods and doing so without fear or judgment. As an aside, kids are most likely to try something new if their parents or caregivers are eating it without saying anything about it. And most kids are least likely to try something new if their parents or caregivers nudge them to, which is crazy to think about. But the reason is it's perceived as pressure, which prevents them from exploring it on their own time and can create some resistance. All right. My slides are, okay, there we go. All right, next, create an environment where there is permission to honor food preferences. Not allowing your child to eat things that he or she likes because it's perceived as unhealthy creates food hierarchies, as I said, and teaches them that there's something uniquely special or different about those foods, which causes this kind of forbidden fruit effect where now they are more appealing and more desired, and the child is more likely to eat more of them than their bodies really want, in some cases leading to binge eating behavior. Not allowing your child to eat any foods that you or that society perceives as unhealthy also increases guilt and shame associated with eating those foods, and may lead to sneaking or hiding food to eat in secret. Again, something else that I don't think any parent wants for their child. Ultimately, we have to acknowledge and appreciate the fact that eating for well-being is about more than just eating the right foods. It's about having a positive relationship with food too. Number 5, limit the use of food as a reward. Choose non-food rewards when possible, and avoid using threats of taking away a certain food as punishment, like no dessert if you keep acting like that. Getting to eat a cupcake because they cleaned their room, or not getting to eat a cupcake because they didn't clean their room, is really not conducive to a healthy relationship with food. Involve your child in the planning, the purchasing, and or the cooking or assembling of meals when you're able to. This is a fantastic way to provide your child with opportunities for positive food-related experiences, and it teaches them really important food-related life skills that they'll need for the rest of their lives. So let them be involved when you have the capacity to do so. And as a mom of 2 young kids, I can absolutely relate to the experiences of not having the capacity to let them help you. So know that I don't live in some fantasy world where this is something that is going to happen every day or every week even, but involve them in the planning, the purchasing, the cooking, etc. when you're able to. Okay. Resist the urge to talk about your weight or your diet in front of your child. If your diet or weight changes are something that feels important to you, that is perfectly fine. But do your best to keep comments about those things out of the earshot of your child, because it sends the message that weight and size are highly valued by you, and can inadvertently lead to your child feeling pressure to look a certain way or be a certain size to be acceptable to you, which I assume would not at all be your intention. So it's best to not talk about those things in front of your child. And lastly, on the topic of food, never ever put your child on a weight loss diet, even if you are concerned about your child's weight and or they are concerned about their weight. By no means does dieting automatically lead to an eating disorder, but there are many negative effects of dieting, both physically and mentally, especially in kids, and it increases people's risk of developing an eating disorder. And kids are particularly vulnerable. Dieting places kids at a significantly higher risk of developing an eating disorder. In 2016, the American Academy of Pediatrics put out a report that said that children who diet are 5 times more likely to develop an eating disorder than children who don't. At the very least, starting a diet as a child almost always sets people up for a lifetime of yo-yo dieting and weight cycling, greater weight gain overall, disordered eating behaviors that can progress to an eating disorder, social isolation, food preoccupation, and body dissatisfaction. And in October of 2022, so a little over a year ago, a report came out that said that people who experience body dissatisfaction face poorer health outcomes, reduced engagement across social circles, school, work, things of that sort, and engage in risky behaviors. If you are concerned about your child's weight, you need to talk to an eating disorder informed dietitian who will help you look at things like overall nutrition, physical activity, physical health, as well as mental and emotional health. And I can certainly give you names of some wonderful eating disorder informed dietitians, but also some food for thought. Be mindful of the fact that if your child was in the 90th percentile for weight at birth and in the 90th percentile for weight at age 10, let's say, chances are they're going to be in the 90th percentile as a teenager as well. That's completely normal. It's not bad or wrong. We want them to stay on their growth curve. So that's something that I want you to keep in mind. Next, let's talk about how to strengthen your child's relationship with physical activity or movement to reduce their risk of developing an eating disorder. All kids benefit from being active regardless of their shape or size, so it's important that we talk about exercise. Number one, resist the urge to talk about exercise as something we do to maintain or change our appearance. For many adults, that is their only motivation for exercising. It's something many adults only do to maintain or change their appearance. But if that is not at all that exercise can do for us, and we don't want to drive the point home with our kids that it is. We want movement to be something that kids maintain joy around, not something that they dread because they have to do it or are supposed to do it to look a certain way. So instead, talk about exercise as something we can do for enjoyment, for energy, for strength, for good sleep, for stress management, for mental health, for spiritual health, etc. Maybe an example of this is in casual conversation, you say, I'm going to move my body today so that fill in the blank. I feel a little more energized, or I can get some better sleep tonight, or I don't feel so overwhelmed, that sort of thing. Next, give your child opportunities to build fundamental movement skills, and this is applicable at any age. Fundamental movement skills are things like balancing, throwing, catching, jumping, running. So go walk in the woods, go play in a creek, throw a football in the yard, do hopscotch in the driveway. Help them build those fundamental skills in ways that are playful and are fun and get their bodies moving. As much as you're able to, give your child opportunities to discover forms of movement that they enjoy, forms of play that they enjoy, whether that's running or climbing or participating in show choir or marching band or playing baseball or dancing. And let me say that they are certainly getting some of this in PE. And having additional opportunities outside of PE when possible is also really valuable, especially as they get older. Also explore forms of movement that you can enjoy with your kids if that's accessible to you, as a way to model joyful, life-giving movement. Us modeling the things that we want for our kids is so impactful. That may be hiking, that may be having dance parties in the living room after school, that may be going on bike rides on the weekends. You can get creative with what this looks like for you and your family. And just as important as normalizing joyful, life-giving movement is normalizing rest. Your child listening to his or her body and acknowledging when it needs rest as opposed to movement is an important skill to learn. So you normalizing rest or just making rest okay gives them opportunities to develop that skill. An example of modeling rest or modeling rest being okay is simply saying, I'm going to rest my body today, not I'm being lazy today, because lazy has a negative connotation and does not mean the same thing as intentional rest. And for the record, just because you are resting does not mean you are lazy. But I'm going to rest my body today is an example of something that you can say to model rest being okay. And number 7, avoid using physical activity as a form of punishment. Just like with food, using physical activity as a form of punishment, for example, making them run laps in the backyard because they didn't clean their room, is not conducive to a healthy relationship with movement. It does not provide them with a positive exercise-related experience, but instead has the potential to instill hatred for movement or an obsession with movement. And we don't want either of those. Lastly, let's talk about how to strengthen your child's relationship with their body to reduce their risk of developing an eating disorder. And then I'm going to provide you with some closing thoughts and some additional resources that you can check out outside of this time together. But first, we need to dispel some myths about bodies and health. The things I listed here are not true. It is not true that weight and size have the biggest impact on our health over anything else. It is not true that larger body size always equals poorer health. It is not true that weight and size are completely dependent on an individual's behaviors or choices. And it's not true that the best way to improve health is to lose weight.
And she's right. You're not.
What is true is that there are a lot of factors that influence health, and health is not just dependent on someone's size. What is true is that despite what many people have been taught, there are people who live in larger bodies and are in good health. There are plenty of people in larger bodies who have fantastic blood panels, who sleep well, who have positive interpersonal relationships, who have incredible stamina, etc. And losing weight does not necessarily mean improving health. What is true is that weight isn't simply a result of an individual's behaviors or choices. Body size isn't, a simple choice as long as you just make good decisions and are a responsible human. There are a lot of different factors that influence one's weight, just like there are a lot of factors that influence one's health. And what is true is that there are ways to improve health and well-being other than just losing weight or trying to change the size of your body. And we must empower people to adopt health promoting behaviors, regardless of their size, for the sake of health and well-being rather than weight control. Now, let me touch on weight stigma for a second. You may have heard that term before, but weight stigma, or negative attitudes and beliefs about an individual because of their weight or size, it's something that's pervasive in our culture, and it has a significant impact on people's physical and mental health and can contribute to the development of an eating disorder. 81% of 10-year-olds are afraid of being fat, according to one study. That's 8 out of 10. So in a class of 20 10-year-olds, 16 of them will be scared of being or becoming fat. Though eating disorders are about much more than just body image, they are far more complex and deep-rooted than that. Eating disorder prevention is going to be really difficult if it's not safe for people to live in bodies that are larger than the thin ideal. And as long as weight stigma and weight bias show up in our households, it won't be safe for our larger kids to live in their bodies. So as parents, we need to work to unlearn weight bias that we all carry, again, just as a part of growing up in the society that we have. And one way that you can do that is to really consider some of these truths and lies that I've laid out for you. Other things you can do to help foster a healthy relationship between your child and their body are listed in the upcoming slides. So number one, neutralize and normalize the inherent diversity of body shapes and sizes that exist in this world. Body size diversity exists in people of all ages, so it's important that kids learn that everyone's body is different. You might keep it as simple as, people come in different shapes and sizes, the same way that people come with different eye color or hair color or different heights. Or you might say some people are bigger and some people are smaller. That's just how they're made. Also, let your child know that their body is going to change. Bodies go through a lot of changes during childhood and adolescence, and kids often feel uncomfortable or insecure or self-conscious about all the changes that are happening. So we want to instill the belief in them that all bodies, not just thin bodies, are lovable and are deserving of dignity and respect. And we want them to develop a core belief that there is nothing to be ashamed of when it comes to their bodies. Talk about the body in terms of what it can do, not just how it looks. Teaching our kids that our bodies are instruments, not ornaments. Here are some examples of things that you can use to talk about what the body can do. So your body allows you to participate in their activity or hobby of choice. Our bodies allow us to give each other hugs when we wake up in the morning. Your body allows you to participate in school so that you can be a whatever they want to be when they grow up. Next, resist the urge to comment on other people's bodies. While everyone's body is their own business and really shouldn't be commented on at all, probably, especially resist commenting positively or negatively on changes in someone's weight or size, particularly around your children. While it comes so naturally to us, it reinforces the idea that there's an ideal body type that we're all striving for, and that some bodies fit within that narrow concept of what's acceptable or what looks good or what's healthy, and others don't. And it's our job to do whatever we can to fit within that narrow concept of an acceptable body. I hope that makes sense. If it doesn't, ask me a question at the end. All right, here we go again, talking about modeling. Model a healthy and positive relationship with your own body. Even if you don't have one yet, fake it till you make it, by refraining from criticizing your body or appearance in front of your child, and by refraining from weighing yourself in front of your child. Our kids are learning how to feel about their own bodies through us. So how we feel about our bodies, or at least how we talk about our bodies in front of them and how we interact with our bodies in front of them, very much impacts them. Number 5, for those accessing social media, encourage your child to assess how what they see on social media makes them feel about themselves and about their body. Do they feel neutral about their body? Do they feel empowered, or do they feel negatively about themselves or their body when they look at XYZ posts? This is where encouraging muting, blocking, unfollowing, etc., can be really crucial. We know that what kids see on social media can have a dramatic impact on their body image. To counterbalance pressure that we all receive from media and from the entertainment industry, make sure that the media you consume, books, shows, movies, who you follow on social media, represents diversity in body shapes and sizes. Our kids see, or at least catch glimpses of, the media we consume. And remember, they are learning how to feel about their bodies through us. So make sure that the media you consume reflects body diversity. Number 7, accept your child's body for whatever it is, whatever that may be right now, and highlight and celebrate their character, their personality traits, their interests, as opposed to their appearance, especially their size, shape, or weight. Teach them and empower them to see themselves as more than their appearance. And finally, when you're navigating helping your child pick out clothing, which we all have to do at some point in this parenting journey, help take the focus off of how their bodies look by guiding them to focusing on things like their personal style, how they feel in different clothing items, how comfortably they can move in different clothing items, and things like that. I have some closing thoughts for you as we near the end of the presentation and open it up for Q&A. After hearing this information today, you might be thinking about ways that you can change the way you communicate with your child about food, exercise, or bodies. And I want to acknowledge that changing the way you communicate about those things can be difficult, especially if you have struggled with your own relationship with food or exercise or your body. With that said, if you're not at a place where you can be at peace with yourself and your body, my advice to you would be to pretend that you are when you're around your kids for your kids' sake, And seek support for yourself, because you deserve that and they deserve that. If your child sees you feeling comfortable with food and with exercise and with your body, it can help them feel comfortable with food and with exercise and with their body. So if you're able to put on the swimsuit and get in the swimming pool and play with them, if that's something you're able to do. Something else I want to address as we start to wrap this up is what to do if people around you are speaking negatively or unhealthily about food, exercise, or bodies. If that happens, just do your best to distract your child if that's an option, or divert the conversation if you're able to. And we can certainly talk about ways to do that. But revisit the situation later if you think that your child may have heard things that may have been unhelpful. So you might say, earlier when so-and-so said XYZ, what did you think about that? And you might just use that opportunity to remind your child that in your household, you believe fill in the blank. And finally, be alert to how your child talks about their appearance, their body shape and size, and food and diets. To kind of assess your child's relationship with food or exercise or their body, if they're older, you can ask them things like, how would you describe your relationship with food? How would you describe your relationship with exercise? How would you describe your relationship with your body? Or you might say, a lot of people's eating is impacted by their emotions. Is yours? How so? And despite our best parenting efforts, eating disorders can still develop. So when in doubt, defer to an eating disorder professional or program. And I'm happy to point you in the direction of some if you want to email me after this. And I'm going to provide you with my email address in just a second. Some eating disorder warning signs to keep an eye out for, and these can show up at any age. Withdrawal from activities that your child used to enjoy, irritability or anxiety around mealtime and or avoiding eating with the family, complaints about the way they look or frequent self-scrutiny, excessively looking at themselves in the mirror, a sudden increase in movement or activity, checking food labels before deciding to eat something, a new desire to eat healthier or be more fit, frequent trips to the bathroom after eating, regularly weighing themselves, refusing to eat from certain food groups, and suddenly only wanting to wear loose-fitting clothing. Now, let me say that if your child exhibits one of these things, I'm not saying that's a guarantee that they have an eating disorder or that you need to call 911. These are just some examples of things that can be characteristic of eating disorders so that you are well informed. One more thing I want to say is this. I mentioned at the beginning of this presentation that people across all body shapes and sizes can have an eating disorder. And I want you to know that you really can't necessarily see an eating disorder or determine whether or not someone has an eating disorder based on their body size or weight or BMI. It's a common misconception that folks who have eating disorders are all underweight, when actually only 6% of people diagnosed with eating disorders are considered underweight. So this is just something that I want you to keep in mind. Ultimately, just trust your instincts. And if you're concerned about your child, again, contact an eating disorder professional or program. It's important to seek help as early as possible because early intervention very positively impacts prognosis. All right, and lastly, I want you to have some resources to access after this, as I mentioned. So here are some books that parents and caregivers in particular might be interested in. Here are some recommended children's books for elementary age kids. Here are some recommended books for preteens. I hope we have some readers in here. And here are some recommended books for teenagers. I also listed some other recommended resources for parents, including Facebook groups, Instagram accounts, podcasts, websites, etc. So I hope that you all find those helpful. Now I will open it up for questions. And remember, I am happy to provide